America, Netherlands, the European Union, basically, wherever Moses Walgembe. We all know very well that on the 14th of January this year, 2021, Uganda held what has been termed by many local and international observers as the most state-sponsored violent election ever in the history of elections in Uganda, if not in East Africa as a region, or probably Africa. As we speak now, the election is over, and Mr. Museveni Tibuhaburwa was declared winner in this highly disputed election, following both pre and, of course, post-state-sponsored violence against mostly his closest contender, Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu of the National Unity Platform. Of course, clearly using the state regime military forces. On the show today, we have Halima Athumani. So Halima is a journalist based in Uganda. I've known Halima in Uganda because I worked in Uganda as a journalist before. She has worked on 93.3 KFM, which is a radio under the Nation Media Group. She has also worked for Uganda Radio Network. It's a news agency. And from what I know, she currently works for Voice of America, African Desk, which is based in Washington, D.C. Halima will be joining us. I understand she's not yet on, but she will be here very soon. We also have Robert Amsterdam. Robert Amsterdam is a common name right now in Uganda. And Robert is an international lawyer with 40 years experience working on high-profile cases around the world. He's the founding partner of Amsterdam and Partners, an international firm with offices based in London and Washington, D.C. He explores areas of public international law, international criminal law, political advocacy. And like I said, he's a common name in Uganda. Remember very well in 2018, August 14th, after Bobiwine, as his song name, whatever musical name is, while campaigning in Arua, underwent a very, very deadly attack by the state, which almost left him dead. And that's the time when he retained Amsterdam as his international lawyer. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, on the show, I also have Michael Kirkpatrick. Michael Kirkpatrick is an American human rights activist. Like you always say, as you refer to yourself, Michael has been in Uganda a couple of times. He worked for some years in northern Uganda during the Joseph Kony War. He's also done a production of a documentary film titled A Brilliant Genocide that details the untold story and suffering of genocide against the people of Acholi by the state military forces under Yoweri Museveni. I mean, I wish we had time, you would be telling us about that probably. Just a brief, maybe, how often have you been to Uganda? Michael. Give me your sound, give me your sound.
Okay, there we go. I've been to Uganda a total of 7 times, starting in 1998. And between 1998 and 2010, I made 7 visits to Uganda.
Okay. All right, that's Michael Kirkpatrick. We shall be getting much from him. We also have Michael Byakuleka. Michael Byakuleka is a former Ugandan government diplomat. He worked with the Foreign Affairs Ministry in Uganda, I think best in the United States right now. That was between 1990 and 2005. So Michael, a graduate of Leicester University, has immense and a lot of wealth about foreign diplomacy. I mean, worked under the same ministry where we are basically going to focus our discussion today. He currently heads the CLOUD, Common League of the Uganda Diaspora and Human Rights Pressure Group, which is based in the United States. Welcome, Richard Martin Byakuleka. Michael, tap your sound, please.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys for including me in your panel of discussion today. Thank you so much. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I also appreciate the presence of those other friends of Uganda, Kirkpatrick and Bob. It's a pleasure to be here and contribute to our discussion. Thank you, Moses.
Thank you, Michael, for being here. Well, let's start. As we speak right now, we're going to be talking about sanctions and aid cancellation and a number of other things that pertain to Uganda. We all know very well that following that badly contested election, Bobiwine, almost half the age of incumbent Yoweri Museveni, we've had post and pre and post violence encounters with the state. Currently, we have body, which is basically supposed to protect human rights all over the world. But the state managed not to look at that as an important organ, and they attacked people, beat them badly. Some of them are right now limping. Others are in hospital. And of course, a number of things before. Halima is on. Halima, welcome to the show. Before you came, we introduced you. Halima, welcome to the show. You want to talk to us? Good to see you again. I haven't seen you.
Good to see you. Good to see you, Moses. Thank you for having me. Sorry that I'm a couple of minutes late. Yeah.
Just briefly, I told you before our viewers, Halima works as a journalist, Voice of America. He worked with 93.3 KFM. We worked together at Parliament, right? And
yes, it is.
Yes, we worked at Uganda Radio Network, which is also a news agency. Welcome, Halima, on this show.
Thank you.
Let's break it down. So I was trying to give you a background of what has been happening in Uganda. Good you're here. You're actually going to give us an intro into this. We saw journalists being battered last week. How is it being fed within the Ugandan masses right now? Following, because I saw like the military trying to show that of the officers that were part of beating up and battling people in front of a UN human rights body were actually apprehended. Yeah. What's your take? Tell us about what is going on. How is that being perceived by the people in Uganda? Halima? All right. As Halima, I understand the challenges of internet back home in Uganda, so I will wait to have her on there. But let's just continue as she comes. Previous Thursday, the European Parliament passed a number of resolutions, including having sanctions on the people in Uganda, the officials in Uganda who have violated human rights in Uganda. Amsterdam, Bob, you've been watching closely what has been happening in Uganda since almost 2018 when you were retained by Bobiwine. What's your take on the current situation, especially in terms of human rights abuses as you've witnessed?
I think frankly, Uganda has reached a point where the government is no longer trying to hide or pretend that they are in any way attorney to international law. I think they've gone the final step towards basically military rule. We may have witnessed the last phony election in Ugandan history, because I don't believe the dictator will have another phony election unless there is success from the ground up in enough demands to bring him to justice and to effect another a real vote, as opposed to the mockery that we've seen. What's changed since the last phony election in Uganda is the change in the world, the Magnitsky Act and other international laws that allow for prosecution of individuals who have engaged in human rights offenses. What we may see is Museveni and the coterie of individuals in the police and military around him, including his son, who runs a torture squad. We may see those individuals sanctioned. And one of the things to understand is after Bobiwine's torture, after Arua, and he, as you know, came to the States, a number of the people who were engaged in his torture have been banned from ever entering the United States and have been placed on a sanctions list already. And I think that it's important to note that that sanctioning of these individuals will continue and I think will accelerate. Now, some of that sanctioning involved monetary controls, freezing of assets overseas, any number of highly personal and difficult restrictions on travel, for instance, that people like Museveni find very difficult, especially people around him. And I think a lot of the theory around the Magnitsky Act is that if you sanction these people around Museveni, you will get into a position where there are splits within the elite circle. Now, that may or may not be possible. As we know, Museveni wants to try to hand power to his son. So what will ultimately happen is going to depend on, Bobby has a large team of lawyers who have been doing a terrific job, both in Uganda and really internationally now, including a terrific guy out of the US who's been working on documenting the election fraud that took place. And I think that, and my hope is that the evidence that's been put together can be used at, among other places, the British Commonwealth.
Yep.
Many people in Uganda are not aware of something called the Harare Declaration. The Harare Declaration is a fundamental charter of human rights and freedoms adopted by the Commonwealth many years ago, to which Museveni was a signatory. And it is my hope that we will be able to seek perhaps something like a suspension of Uganda so that real legitimacy will be taken away from the fraud that's taken place. I don't call Museveni by his elected position. I don't think he's really, I don't even think we should call it an election. I think one of the most important things we in the community outside and inside Uganda can do is speak truth to power. And speaking truth to power basically means calling Museveni dictator, whatever else you want to call him, but certainly not any sort of elected title. The real winner of the election was clearly Robert Kyagulanyi, and there's no disputing it from the evidence that we've seen on the ground. And, I came on this to say one thing to the community in the diaspora, and that is that we should be engaging in constant protest at the embassies, not only of Uganda, but of the major donor countries.
We will come to that, Bob. Just a moment. Right from your introduction, you're talking about the sanctions and the various tools, and that is exactly what the European Parliament last week passed, asking that the responsible violators of these human rights abuses be sanctioned, be punished under their new mechanism, which is the same thing like the Magnitsky law in the United States. But some people in Uganda, especially those in the government, have always talked, ill against this and about it and saying, what, we have nothing we want in the United States or European Union and so on, which of course, in my thinking, I don't think it's right, it is correct. But so how do the people of Uganda come to the aid of all these sanctions coming up? How are they gonna be the weak people who are under torture, those who are being kidnapped every day under the drones, those who are being tortured in the cells. I'm told all the cells are full, CMI, wherever, and the government is denying, how does this help them? How do we get to their aid real quick?
Again, I would say to you that, it's the same thing that we've said before in Uganda, which is we take pictures, and we've had a lot of helpful pictures that have been taken. We take those pictures and we plaster them outside of the foreign embassies. We write letters to the individual legislators. I don't know if you saw last week at the European Parliament a very dramatic speech by a Hungarian legislator. A Hungarian legislator talking about Uganda. It was very moving. We need to mobilize. We need to mobilize people in Uganda to take those pictures and record the names and to protest where they can safely. And we need to mobilize the diaspora to protest and to provide names and details to all of their local representatives. And, quite frankly, a very important statement came out 2 weeks ago from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in the United States, a conference that was founded by Martin Luther King in favor of Bobiwine and demanding a new election in Uganda. One of the most important things is that we get the Black community in the United States to adopt this cause as its own. I think that's critically important. And Jeff Smith did a lot of work to get this program that was going to be going on in Uganda delayed. And I think the more we can remind multinational corporations that there is now a global human rights act. It's very new. It's called the Ruggie Principles on Corporate Human Rights. Most people don't know anything about it, but it has existed for a few years. And these Ruggie Principles specifically identify complicity with regimes such as Museveni's as being a violation of international law and corporate responsibility. So in addition to those individuals that we want sanctioned, we need to vote with our pocketbooks and begin boycotts of companies that are located and working with the Ugandan government. What we need to do is use every sanction available to us as individuals. This isn't, we can't rely on Bobiwine and the people around Bobby for everything. We have to, and by the way, the other opposition candidates who were incredibly brave as well. There's been a tremendous amount of bravery exhibited in Uganda. And, I've been in Africa for 45 years. And the one thing I can tell you that real change will come from inside Uganda. We can't count on the United States or Europe. Yes, we can push them for sanctions. We can do all of that. But I'll tell you, one institution we have to change is the African Union.
Yep.
The impotence of the African Union is a tremendous embarrassment to everybody who wants to see change in Africa. So there's a lot of work that has to be done inside Uganda and inside Africa to obtain compliance. But these corporate sanctions, as well as the individual actions people can take, these are the important steps that need to be made. And, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, can I have Halima? Welcome back. Halima is back on. Halima, I wanted you to give us a brief of the perception of what happened last week when journalists and, of course, all the other honorable elect members of the National Unity Platform were attacked by the military. I mean, these are some of the human rights abuses that we are talking about right now. Government has come up, the military has come out, including the CDF, David Muhoozi, is it a general? He has come up to apologize But I mean, we have had a number of apologies. I mean, 2016, we had apologies from the military about attacking journalists. All the other years that we've covered elections or held elections, there's been apologies against attacks on media, and of course, on the rest of the people in Uganda, not only the media. So Halima, just break it down for us. What is going on? What is the human rights saying in Kampala?
Well, I think many human rights organizations did condemn what happened on Wednesday because journalists had gathered. They went for the press conference at the NUP offices in Kamosha, and then thereafter went to join Bobiwine. I think they had gone. But then I had a talk with someone at the UN office on that day. And he did mention that, when they come in, they're only going to be allowed very few people. And so when other journalists went there, I decided not to, because personally, on my own judgment, I didn't think, I should go and spend the whole day waiting outside, considering the fact that he had already spoken. So I decided just to, to come back home. Only a few hours later for me to hear, journalists calling me and saying, what's going on? I hear journalists are being beaten. Only for me to call colleagues and find out and realize that they had actually been beaten by the military officers who were there. So I cannot give you, a breakdown of what transpired, why they were being beaten, but at least from the videos that we saw was that the journalists were waiting outside, and then, the military decided to disperse most of the people, and so some of the journalists were beaten, which included journalists from NTV, New Vision, NBS, among others who had gathered to cover the event on that day. So the next day, yeah.
This comes at a time when the European Parliament has actually just, passed a resolution to have sanctions on the government. And it looks like they don't even fear about anything.
I think there was a response from the Foreign Affairs Minister, Honorable Sam Kutesa, who did write to the EU and talked about the resolutions, and he cites a number of issues. And I think one of them is him, I think in his letter he cites saying Uganda has really been affected by COVID, and because of that, Honorable Chagulanyi has been violating some of the, the SOPs that have been set up by the government, and so for them they say that I think Honorable Kutesa's letter to the EU, his response to the EU was that some of these SOPs were being violated, and this is why the military has come out to try and make sure there are no crowds being gathered. But of course, there are always questions. For example, during the elections, there were times when you see some legislators from the ruling party were gathering, in crowds, and the Electoral Commission constantly kept calling some of these legislators to come and explain why they were gathering. But then you'd see there was not really a strong hand that was being used against them compared to members of the opposition, who include the FDC, among other legislators. So it is a tough period. And so we'll just wait and see. But I think the Honorable Kutesa also said, Uganda is a sovereign country. Please do not interfere. We know you give us aid. But, we can we've made mistakes. I think he did agree and said, yes, we've made mistakes. But there are things that we have to decide for ourselves as a country.
All right. Thank you very much. I want us to watch this video from Ismail is going to play this video. Let's watch it.
We really are we really, very often we are presented as, what we really are we really, very often we are presented as enemies. Is it so?
You see, the problem I see in the West, really, you have two problems now, and that's why you waste our time. Because there's nothing that we don't know, either in Africa or in the world. So, but what I see on your side, you seem not to have enough information. You seem to have two problems. You seem to have some deficit in philosophy, but also deficit of information. So therefore, when it comes to now, the question is, are we enemies? For us, we don't see you as enemies. But somehow, you don't see that by involving yourselves in matters which you don't understand well, and which you shouldn't, even if you understood, these are not your matters, these are our matters, these are our internal affairs. Even if you had a good understanding, it would not be in order for you to involve yourself. Apart from the fact that you may not even have the understanding.
Thank you very much for playing that. All of us had that voice. That is a voice of Yoweri Museveni. And he met members of the European Union led by Mr. Pacific Atletico. And that is what he had to tell them. He had to scare them. That happened in 1971 for the record. Dr. Obote also warned Britain at a time like this when he was being faced with challenges where he was, of course, kidnapping Ugandans, doing basically the same thing, Ugandans disappearing. He was warned. Idi Amin also did the same. Here we have Yoweri Museveni also doing the same, meeting the same diplomats, and all they said, they just kept quiet. Michael Kirkpatrick, tell us, what do you make of that kind of threats, what they call threats by the Europeans, as Museveni says?
Well, it kind of reminds me of Amin's infamous or well-known saying is, I will revenge you, when he spoke to the Europeans and the British. I think they're appeasing him. It reminds me of the historic issue of Chamberlain and Hitler. Chamberlain tried to make peace with the Nazis, and in hindsight, we can look back and see what Chamberlain did. It was a failure. He was just trying to appease them, and Hitler just ran right through it. Museveni is doing the same. As I was listening to his interview with the European officials, one thought came to mind. The old man has gone mulaloo. He's lost his mind. He is the leader of a country. He is the leader of a sovereign nation. And he's literally insanely crazy. People's lives are at stake. Recording these atrocities, they are not done in secret anymore. The idea of safe houses, and I think they're called Kabaka squads, those cannot happen in obscurity anymore. Just like in the United States of America with the movement of Black Lives Matter and the plight of African Americans for years and years and years, saying that these things, these abuses were happening to them, and pleading with people, pleading with government, pleading with officials, pleading with leaders to do something about it. What it took was the ability to record in real time these atrocities. That's exactly what Ugandans are doing. They're able to take photos, they're able to take videos, and they can take those things to the court of public opinion. They can be shared on social media by citizen journalists, and they can be shared by professional journalists, whether they're people like Halima, whether they are journalists in the print media, whether they are journalists within Uganda, or whether they are journalists outside of Uganda. Communication is key. Journalists may not be the ones with information on the front lines, but if that information can be passed to the proper people, like at Voice of America, American outlets, European outlets, we all know the influence of the Chinese in Uganda, I haven't heard anybody talk about reaching out to the Chinese. I know they don't care about human rights abuses.
Thank you, Michael, for that submission. I'll get back to you later.
Yeah.
I want to bring in Richard as a former diplomat. What do you expect as a response from the European Union officials who are faced by such threats from Yoweri Museveni in front of them? In fact, at some point, I wondered when he told them that, you see, even if you know what is going on, just shut up. Like, even if you see us killing people, it is not a matter of you, it is a matter of our country. In other words, it's like, I know how to kill my country, my people. It doesn't matter about you. It's about me. When I kill them, it's like in your house and someone sees you as a neighbor and you're beating your children, you're torturing them, and you're like, hey, it's not a matter about you. It's about a matter of my house. I know how to kill my children, so let me kill them if I kill them, because I know who I don't need and who I need. You know, in America, of course, you know it is different. When you are torturing your wife, for instance, in a house, when you are doing anything, a neighbor can call 911 and 911 can come to their rescue, you know, and you have no say. Richard, what's your take on such?
What is happening now is the world is witnessing a full transition from quasi-democracy to pure autocracy and just outright impunity. And one other point I would like to observe is people should know that the presidency of Mr. Museveni has, to a very large extent, been premised on the external constituents and most prominently Western democracies. Now, after the 2021 electoral fiasco, with its myriad of electoral impropriety, there is nobody within the external constituents that would like to risk their credibility by associating with Mr. Museveni, because what Mr. Museveni did in that electoral fiasco in Uganda was just beyond human imagination. In fact, as far as elections go, we have the feeling that what happened was just he got the results of elections, tore them apart, and then authored new statistics. Now, I don't know why you appear to be slanted. Are you okay? Now you're fine. I was worried about you. So, yes, so now Mr. Museveni has gone beyond bonkers because Kirkpatrick was saying, Museja Mulalu. No, he's not Mulalu now. He's suicidal. Now, he has realized that he has lost a critical constituency. And before this constituency comes after him, he has decided to open war against it. He has drawn a line in the sand and he said, you guys, you're not concerned. This is me. Now, he is sure also that as far as the internal constituency for change goes, he has totally undermined it and weakened it through two prongs, bribery and intimidation. And now intimidation has gone to the highest level that we have ever witnessed. So what is remaining for him now is to totally dismiss and handle the external constituents. And as I've said, he has decided to open a war with it. However, I totally concur with what Bob said in the beginning, that what we have now to do, because you see, as regards democratic change, the two constituencies that matter, internal and external, primacy is always with the internal. But I'll tell you something. When we get to Uganda, it is inconceivable that the primary constituents, that the internal constituencies primary any longer, because Museveni has weakened it so much. Indeed, now, the external constituency in the case of Uganda is achieving near primacy. So it is now incumbent upon activists abroad, including the Ugandan diaspora and all friends of Uganda, to engage the following factors or the following persons. One, the legislatures in the countries, in Western democracies. And before I mention the others, or I mention them when you give me more time, I want to particularly emphasize this in this time you have given me for a minute.
Okay.
We must recognize that when we speak about Western democracies, we mean basically two corollaries or two parts. We have the executives, which are the governments in those countries, but we also have the legislatures. Now, in as far as we in Uganda are concerned with our democracies, the factors that can help us are the people's representatives, the legislatures, the lawmakers. The executives have raw interests for which we can hardly do anything about. You see how the European government is very quick to acknowledge Museveni, very quick, saying, oh, we shall continue with development programs. They are very fast because they want to go ahead with their agenda. They are hard pressed with time. The only people with us are the legislatures.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Martin. Sorry, that's where I was coming to actually. My point here is, yes, indeed, like you have noted, looks like, I mean, even after that speech before them, even after the president, of course, according to the Ugandan constitution, is still president until a new president is sworn in. But from all the threats that he made, there was no response, and that puts a question to where we are going. And the last tweet I read was that the European Union is ready to continue helping in the development of Uganda. So does that mean that everything that they passed in the European Parliament, you've talked about the legislators, does that mean that all the sanctions that they plan to have to be passed on the violators of human rights, including heads of the military and every other people who have been doing that and making people disappear and so on, are going to go scot-free? Bob? Amsterdam?
Yes. No, that doesn't mean anyone's going scot-free. I think the end of impunity in Uganda is finally coming, but I think that it won't just be through legislators or the executive. It is going to have to be through African institutions as well as European institutions. We are going to have to get to the elders in Africa. We're going to have to get to other political leaders. Because, by the way, this complete breakdown in governance has not just happened in Uganda. It's happened in Tanzania as well. This is not just a phenomena of Uganda. I think the seizing of 3,000 is almost unique today, outside of what we've been hearing in China. I think
Myanmar as well.
Myanmar as well, but interestingly, in Myanmar, we don't have these disappearances. These disappearances, this is out of Latin America in the 70s under the military junta. We are really close.
Tanzania, you handled the case of Tindo Lissu.
Yes, and we're still handling that case, and we are. I will tell you, there was a lot of violence in Tanzania that continues with the president of Tanzania denying that COVID exists. But there is a level of ongoing intimidation in Uganda, which, by the way, is also, we haven't mentioned yet on this show the internet shutdown. And that is a violation of, a very specific international convention where it's under the ITU. And there is a convention that specifically bans this type of conduct from a government. We need to get into all of these violations. That convention, by the way, is called the Tampere Convention. We need to get into a full-throated attack on all of these various international bodies and put together, there's been a great submission made to the ICC, but now we need to also incorporate that into a major submission to not only the EU on the Magnitsky Act, but to the Commonwealth for suspension of Uganda.
So Bob, I want to come in there. Yes, we are talking about the resolutions condemning the violence, the continued harassment, and the continued disappearance, condemnation. We've had the American ambassador condemning, it's a lot of diplomacy. Meanwhile, the people on ground are continually being picked up in drones. Meanwhile, many continuing to disappear, many continuing to be killed. You know what I mean? How fast can the international community act? And now we are seeing diplomats being threatened in State House. So how you as a law, you are an international lawyer. I mean, you've handled a number of international cases before. Where is the hope? Yes, I understand that Ugandans have a big role in their country. They really, really have to. And apparently, they have really tried. They have tried. I mean, they are very powerless. They are very weak. This is a president who fears nothing. I mean, he will kill them if they ever protest. He'll shoot at them. We have seen that happen.
Look, we need to understand, this is not a unique situation historically. When the wall came down and the Russians had to fight against the Baltic states, Gorbachev killed quite a few people, but the people in the Baltic states stood up, held hands, and formed a 1,000-mile corridor of people that ultimately led to the collapse of Russian control over the Baltics. There's a terrible danger in overestimating what the international community can do. If the people of Uganda peacefully rise, Museveni is over in 24 hours. We all need to understand that. The population of those with sticks and stones is 100 times greater than those with guns.
Yep.
And as we've seen from a lot of the films of Bobiwine, a lot of the people in the military and a lot of the people in the police are on Bobby's side. I stood in the middle of a demonstration in Bangkok 10 years ago and watched dozens of people struck down tragically during the Bangkok uprising. And I can tell you that that uprising brought the government not only to its knees, but eventually they were removed. So these kinds of things can happen. And to think that this will, be the international community alone that will change it is to really, I think, create false hope. This can only occur, exactly as Michael says, with people power. And people power, let's remember it didn't come from that, but let's remember the relative of people power, which was the Aquino uprising in the Philippines against Marcos. And what happened in that case? They rose up again on the roads, millions of Filipinos, and they brought down Marcos. That is what happens when these revolutions are successful.
And indeed, this happened in Tunisia. We saw it work in Sudan. Even when Omar al-Bashir was so strong, he had weapons that were so strong, but the people, in the end, got him out. So it means it's still incumbent on the people of Uganda to say at least at one time that we are tired and we want to see you out. And probably that could make a difference. I want to bring in Halima right here. My colleague Halima, I know you've been doing this work with a lot of enthusiasm, writing and making sure people understand, get information on what is happening around the country. We know very well that the DGF, the Development Governance Fund, apparently was suspended. It's been helping a lot of people in terms of aid. A number of people, a number of ministries, a number of organizations, but of course, notwithstanding the fact that the government has cracked down on a number of non-government organizations. Some of them are no longer working, which means so many people are not having a daily bread. They have nothing on table in terms of how going out to work and all that. And here we have the international community, which has fed Uganda actually for years. The 35 years Museveni has been in power, he's received tremendous aid, in terms of from China, from even North Korea, a country that apparently is questioned. The United States has provided billions, of dollars of taxpayers' money. Let me ask you, Halima, if aid is stopped, I know that sanctions can probably hold those, who have been part of this for non-traveling and all that. But aid, in particular, if aid is held by the international community, what is going to happen to the people of Uganda?
Moses, let's not forget that I think, according to statistics, Uganda is probably the 13th most. It ranks 13th largest recipient of donor aid worldwide, and these monies go, to our security, to our education, to our health. When you talk about health, you're talking about malaria and HIV. To the office of the Prime Minister, which Uganda is home to over 1.4 million refugees. There's infrastructure development. There's so much that this aid comes down to. So if you ask what happens, these are the people. If people who have enrolled under PEPFAR, for example, that is sponsored by USAID, that is the HIV treatment, those people won't get that kind of income. Refugees, time and time and again, you've seen Uganda try to, hold summits just to get more support for refugee support in the country. And so these are the people who are going to struggle, people who are getting education, whose education depends on some of this donor aid, whose health depends on some of this donor aid. So the agriculture, for example, Uganda is a highly agricultural country. So what happens to these people? So yes, as much as some people say, let's cut aid, and we all know that we've had scandals in many of our ministries, regarding monies that have been taken through corruption, monies that have, gotten lost. You remember Global Fund, that was supporting TB, malaria, and HIV. You've heard about the OPM scandals, where we've even had officials who had been, taken out of office because of their involvement in these scandals. So there are so many Ugandans who are going to suffer. Yes, monies get lost through these scandals, the people who get them, but there are still people, who, if they are lucky enough to receive this money, who will not be able to, because if you go to countries, places like, for example, Northern Uganda, you find that there's so many NGOs in these places, and these NGOs are donor supported, I think when DGF, when there was news about the closure of DGF, the first thing that came to my mind, I was like, I thought about the news first. And then I was telling myself that, my former workplace, that is Uganda Radio Network, actually gets some of its funding from DGF. So you ask yourself, what happens to the monies that are going to this is cutting down communication. This is cutting down, monies to media houses that are getting, their news from, for example, Uganda Radio Network. So there's so many people, like you say, jobs, people who are going to lose jobs because of this, because most of these monies are going to to NGOs that are working in the country. But yes, the government has come up and said certain NGOs are certain NGOs are actually financing terrorists in the country or terrorism activities, and they've been shut down because of that. They are being investigated. So there's so much that is at stake in case donor aid was to be cut.
And do you think that helps? Because most of the money, probably we can look at aid that goes directly to the government in terms of military aid. If, for instance, a country like America, there's a lot of classified aid that goes down to the army, most of which I understand that ends up in the Special Forces Command, which is apparently the terror group within the UPDF that is making people disappear, that is killing people, that, did a lot of election irregularities, as of course that's a case in court. So do you think if such aid was held up, if followed by sanctions, could that help probably squeeze the regime to being submit to the people's will?
Moses, I cannot speak for the classified because I do not know what is in the classified budget or what is in the classified information. But what I know in the unclassified information that I think even the donors want us to know is that the money, for example, that they inject in our security is not necessarily for the army that is being used within the country. Okay, so we all know that Uganda has troops, for example, in Somalia. They have troops in South Sudan, where they've gone out for peacekeeping missions or just to support the governments in power there. So if the US knows that the support that it is giving to the Ugandan government for security is being given to officers who are operating in Somalia, and someone would say that is legit. Maybe because also don't forget that these donor countries also have their interests, and their interests are also in countries like South Sudan, Somalia. Remember, we live in a region which has lots of rich minerals, and these donor countries also know why they're giving us support when they say this is for security. So if our governments are the ones trying to divert that money, maybe going ahead to finance the operations within Kampala, that is something different. Moses, you're muted.
All right, sorry about that. I want to bring in Michael Kirkpatrick. Michael, what's your take? Do you think sanctions will help? Do you think if we got hold of the aid, if international world got hold of the aid, could you think that could help probably lessen down on the way government of Uganda, the regime in power, handles or mishandles the people of Uganda?
The issue of sanctions it's a double-edged sword. Halima touched on a lot of the subjects. I can only speak as an American, and from an American point of view, sanctions.
Because actually, a lot of your taxpayer, you and me who work here, a lot of the taxpayer, our money goes back to Uganda indirectly, and it ends up in the hands of these people, and they buy guns, and it is actually the money that you pay so heavy as you work every hour. Yeah. That is the money that is being used to shoot people, people, the people who we want to be alive.
And that's the knowledge and information that needs to be shared with American citizens about what's going on in Uganda, is that their taxpayer money is going, a huge amount of aid is going into Uganda. That money, there is a quid pro quo going on between the government of Uganda and the government of the United States of America. It doesn't matter if Obama is president. It doesn't matter if Donald Trump is president. It does not matter if Joseph Biden is president. There is a continuing quid pro quo between the US and Uganda. And as Halima said, it involves a lot of military. There are proxy wars. America is fighting wars all over the world, but they're using Ugandan soldiers as mercenaries. Museveni has sacrificed his own people to die for the causes of other nations. And people need to understand that. We, American taxpayers, we're funding that. A lot of Americans don't know that there were multitudes of Ugandans in Iraq. Why were Ugandans in Iraq? The same Ugandans are in Somalia because Americans have interest there. They're in Sudan. I guarantee you they're in Yemen. What interests do Ugandans have in Yemen? They don't. But Americans have interests everywhere. So that money, the pressure of the American taxpayer needs to be brought to the forefront as to how this money's being used. Now, sanctions, if you use that to cut off and to starve certain parts of the Ugandan government, I don't believe in trickle down. If people think that money is going from the top of the US government to the top of the Ugandan government and somehow it magically trickles down to the everyday citizen, that does not happen. Officials do not have holes in their pockets. It goes in their pockets and it stays there. So I can't hold Ugandan officials accountable as an American citizen, but I can hold US officials accountable. I can hold them accountable as to how our taxpayer money is being used. And that pressure to, not to threaten to withhold it, because a lot of the programs, whether it's UPE, which is foreign funded, whether it may be PEPFAR, which benefits a lot of people, a lot of those groups that are funded by Western donors are very valuable to Ugandan citizens, and that's part of the double-edged sword.
Michael, supporters of peace in the world could probably say that maybe Uganda having the opportunity to help maybe America and the other countries or European Union to help them fight terrorism, for instance, in Somalia, as it is happening right now, it could be a good cause, But for me, the question here is, because any government that will come in power, for instance, if we woke up in the morning and Robert Kyagulanyi is the president, I mean, he would also want the region, the Great Lakes region, to have peace, for instance. And we have the Somalis and every other country around the region that needs, needs the help of maybe the American soldiers and the American aid. My take here is that that could probably require us to, be part of this. So supporters of that will say that we probably need Uganda being part of that fight against terrorism is a good move. It is good. For me, the point here is why then should the government boast of that to hold the international community on like tenterhooks? Hey, because we are giving you the soldiers. These are Ugandans who are willing to go and help in the fight against terrorism. It doesn't mean that it should reciprocate in dictatorship, in supporting a dictator. Any other leader can do that. Any other leader can ask Ugandan soldiers through the parliament of Uganda, through the legislation, and provide a reason for them to go to Yemen, for instance, like you're talking about, for them to go to Iraq, for a cause that is, it's an international cause and we are a global world, For me, the question is, should that be a reason to hold onto Uganda, have them work with a dictatorship that is killing people in the end? Martin, what's your take?
You see, the mistake that our friends in the executives in Western democracies make is to want to advance their interests, especially the fight against terrorism, through making alliances with dictators. We are saying using dictators to further the interests of Western democracies could actually be counterproductive. We are now saying it's okay to work with our countries to kind of help you to achieve your interests. However, when you are doing so, ensure our needs as well. Do not embolden the dictators. Support our own democratization. Because in the end, democracies in Africa and other countries, which you use as proxies, can very much help the end result of your interests. And I tell you, the reason why some of us activists put legislatures at the top of the pyramid of which actors we should work with in Western democracies, because we want to appeal to the common people, the population in those countries, and say, look, you are the taxpayers in these countries, great democracies. And it's totally ironical that your taxpayer dollars are going to be used to perpetuate dictatorships abroad. So what we are saying, please stop doing so. And this is a strategic relationship that activism has with legislatures, because the budgets of monies that are to be spent abroad on dictators are passed by the legislators. So when we engage them, we are saying, please do not pass those monies because of A, B, C, D. And we promise you, once democracy returns to our countries, we shall be better positioned to serve your interest. But hold on to that money for now. Please suspend, totally suspend. We don't want some aid to be suspended. The non-essential aid that comes to Uganda pales in comparison to the military aid that comes to Uganda. We are saying just suspend the whole thing. We can deal with the ramifications of suspending essential aid, because really it pales in comparison to the military aid.
In other words,
yes, sanctions can work.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. Of course, I also understand that sanctions can work, I squeeze the balls out of them, stop giving them money. And at the end of the day, countries like Uganda, I know that in the end, it could affect the economy, but the economy is already affected by the fact that people are dying. So then probably something needs to come up. The people are weak. I want to bring in Bob here on this aid issue. Bob, I understand the only successful sanction that we have got was on General Kayihura when the Magnitsky Act actually came up and beat him so badly. Apparently, we know that there has been more sanctions that have been promised by the leadership of Senator Menendez. We also have a resolution that is still on somewhere on table in the Foreign Affairs, the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee. So my question to you, Bob, is that is this aid issue going to help? If the aid that is provided to the regime in Uganda is held up, do you see any kind of benefits in as far as getting the dictator out of abilities to torture people and do all the human rights abuses is concerned?
Listen, I think that the problem we face, and I think a major tranche of money was just released. I think the problem we face is that cutting off the military aid requires a real rethink by the United States. The United States has a fundamental misperception in its foreign policy. And that misperception is that they believe that Museveni is a stabilizer in the region. Museveni is a predatory warlord. If you ask the South Sudanese who I work with about Museveni, they call him they actually think he was involved in the death of the real leader of South Sudan, who died mysteriously in a helicopter.
That's John Garanga, who died in a plane crash.
Exactly.
Those sentiments are actually so many. Yes. But the investigations are less about it.
But, and Garang is just the beginning of the story. I mean, if you read what the UN had to say about Museveni and the DRC, if you read what is going on in Somalia, Michael, I can't see what you're putting up, but Congo, absolutely. I mean, what happened in the Congo was not only the rape of the country by Museveni and others, Mugabe as well, but a behavior of Museveni exactly like the whites did at the Berlin conference, going in and acting like colonialists and partitioning the country. And I think, one of the things that drives me crazy is when we talk about Museveni as a liberator, Museveni is a neo-colonialist. He is colonizing his people in a form of internal colonialism, where, in fact, he's turning Uganda back into something like a feudal society. And just because he's Black doesn't mean that's not going on. And we need to make it clear that he is a predator, he is a warlord, and that the United States, which sees everything through this securitization modality, needs to rethink their position in Africa. Because I'm not sure if it was Michael or who was talking about China, but in fact, China and Russia are increasingly important in Africa. And we should actually address both those countries. It shouldn't just be the United States or Europe alone. And we have to get into dialogue with these other countries that are becoming major players. And I think that it is critical to understand that the military to military aid has to stop right away. And that is a fundamental issue of the Department of Defense. When Bobiwine and others were tortured after Arua, one of the things we realized that the implements of torture were provided from the United States. In an incredible, shameful episode. I'm sitting here in Turkey. I'm writing an op-ed that will be in a newspaper here tomorrow. And, one of the things I say to Turks who are irate at their relationship with the United States is, this country took in 3.5 million refugees from Syria, and the United States took in 10,000. And then when it came to Mexico, they caged the children of the refugees. I mean, the United States needs to wake up to their own reality. And the way they deal with Africa is highly problematic, as it is with all the donor countries. And I'll say something that many won't appreciate, which is that I believe many of the aid agencies are in their own way colonizing Africa. I think there's tremendous problems with aid agencies from the West that cultivate dependence as opposed to independence. And I think that's a terrible problem. So one of the key takeaways I would ask is that we stop talking about Museveni's engagement in other countries as a stabilizing influence, and we start calling him the destabilizer that he is.
Okay.
If we
absolutely. Yes, like you're saying, that brings me to a question by one Scovia. We have a number of people who are sending in their questions right now. We really thank you so much for being a part of this. And one Scovia is saying theories of authoritarianism say that entrenched dictators like Museveni are rarely taken out through mass protests because they have means to repress the mass. And secondly, they have share power with those in the inner circle of the dictatorship that help them to rule, let alone the foreign support that thereof. Of course, this is common in the regime thereof. How can Ugandans create a mass movement that targets not only Museveni, but also those within the inner circle?
Well, I mean, to be frank with you, this is exactly what Ugandans are doing with people power. This is exactly what they're doing. I think the question is, how can more Ugandans rise up, and how can the West support them through the types of issues and matters we've discussed earlier, and through taking the lenses off government officials? And, I'll tell you, I totally agree with our colleague who spoke earlier about Richard. I totally agree with Richard that legislative bodies are very important. If we have members of the diaspora who are prepared to get involved, let them call their members of the House in the United States, or in Canada, their member of parliament, and let them know what the situation is in regard to Museveni. Let them know about the kidnappings and the torture. Send them pictures, update them. This is a very powerful tool. It's called democracy, which unfortunately Uganda doesn't share. But I will tell you, I have been contacted by members of the Ugandan government. There are people inside the government that are deeply distressed by what's going on. Museveni is not leading a united front anymore. People realize the time is coming to an end. But I will say this, I've watched Museveni for years. I've listened to him speak. The man stood up and talked with a smile on his face about the beating of Bobiwine. So this is not a guy who's trying to curry favor in the West. This is a guy who's trying to play the strong man to his own constituency. And it's going to take a lot to remove him and his family. But I think the people of Uganda are fed up enough to take those steps.
Thank you very much, Bob, for that outline. I know we're about to get to the close of this, but I want to bring in Halima with a question from one of the people who are watching us here. And he's talking about corruption. And of course, but I'll pick on this. Someone says that, how do we get Ugandans from relying on saviors, like the opposition leaders, to a point where we have grassroots movements to create a movement that is leaderless, because we are all invested in our own liberation instead of relying on individuals?
Moses, I think we've all talked about how right now the power of Ugandans is going to be in their legislators who were elected, and I think that Ugandans did their part. They elected legislators. So now it is going to be upon these legislators who were elected to go and speak for the people, irrespective of what they are going to say before Parliament. NUP has a number of legislators, probably one of the largest number of opposition ever since in our Parliament's history that has been elected at a particular time. They can use that. The NRM, of course, has the majority. They too can use that. So I think for now, the Ugandans, the only movement they have right now is to, if they use the constitution, Bobiwine has gone to court, which is the legitimate, the right way for him to, to contest what he calls an illegal election. Ugandans did vote for legislators who will go speak for them. I think that's how Ugandans are going to, that's their movement. I don't know what other movement we are talking about, but that is the movement for Ugandans. We are not in the, in the 1980s where you're going to say, let them go to the bush or do something like that, So for me, that's my take on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Michael, your take. What do you think on such a question that probably Ugandans need? For me, my thinking with the question here is that this person thinks that when do we have a moment where Ugandans are openly part of this? I mean, we have seen them, yes, rise up and, whatever they have gone through. Apparently, this kind of disappearance efforts and kidnaps are meant to break their hearts, to break them down, to kind of prevent them from any further protests, which is actually by law legal acceptable within the human rights laws. People have a right to, protest peacefully, gather and protest against what they think is bad. And this could do two things: either raise the government to a point where they understand that, hey, people are hurt and there must be redress, or probably invite the international community, given the response from the regime, which probably in a country like Uganda would be wanting to kill them, beat them up, and which of course calls for international intervention. So Michael, what's your take on that?
Well, I just want to let people know, people that are watching, and also since this will be recorded to be shared later, that those people on the front lines, you have allies around the world. There are people that hear you. There are people that are your advocates who are sharing this information. You may not see or hear it, but believe me, it's being brought to the attention of leaders around the world. It's being brought to the attention of other human rights activists. It's being brought to the attention of just average everyday citizens who care. Ugandans at the grassroots level in today's world have the ability to reach other people at the grassroots level. You can reach everyday citizens one-on-one, through the power of social media and different technologies. My role is to be an encourager. I would never ask a Ugandan to do something that I would not do myself. Believe me, I would not do anything that would endanger myself. If that would mean it would endanger a Ugandan, and I would never ask a Ugandan to endanger themselves. Now, I understand the environment's different. I've certain things here in the U.S. that I may not have to fear that is drastically different in Uganda. But I believe, from my point of view, the tide is turning. I know that Ugandans have probably heard this before. The dictator in power now has been there since 1986, the longest he has survived how many U.S. presidents? 5 or 6 U.S. presidents. Most Ugandans who are alive today, the majority of Ugandans alive today have only known one leader. That's unfathomable to most of the citizens of the world. There has to be change, and the tide is turning. I had mentioned this the other day to Ishmael. The darkest that things can get is right before the dawn. Right before the sun comes up over the horizon is when it's the darkest. And it may seem really dark right now, but the dawning of a new Uganda is literally right around the corner. The tide is turning. There will be people, Mr. Amsterdam had addressed this. There are people within the Ugandan government. When people see the tide turning, people in positions of power, politicians, district leaders, if they are now supporting the NRM, when they start sensing that the Titanic is sinking, they will jump ship, and they are ready to jump ship. They just need the assurance that they won't be abandoned. They will, once that tide is turned and people start jumping ship and in unison, the one thing that hasn't been discussed here, we need to eliminate the tribalism. There is such diversity in Uganda because of its geography and different people groups. You got to stand together. Stand together. The tribalism has no place in change that is coming for Uganda. Tribalism has actually been the weapon that Museveni has used to divide people. Tribalism is a curse, is an ancestral curse that will further divide people. We, Ugandans and the global community, have to stand together and denounce the tribalism, denounce the racism, and just stand together.
I guess the people of Uganda have been doing well on that, Michael. I mean, apparently, when you see there's been a lot of unity from all over the different parts of the country, people coming together. I mean, previously we had the National Unity Platform, for instance, as an opposition party. Of course, I'm not saying there are no other that are strong, but the NUP had, many of them, especially critics within the government, were saying that this party, does not have support from all over the country. And I mean, it was visible from this election that the National Unity Platform had a lot of ground support from almost all parts of the region. That's why they moved fast to stop this support and, limit, make it lame, make it appear, as if it is weak at the end of the election period. But back to you, Biakuleka. I know that we have a few minutes, less than 10 minutes, but I want us to get down to summarizing this forum today. We thank so much the people who have been part of this. I know you have so many comments. They will be running throughout the week. The discussion will keep going, so keep commenting, and we'll be able, these participants will be able to keep dropping comments or answers or on those comments. But I want to bring in, before Richard, there are two people who badly are raising their hands, that Cristiano Vinco and Paul Phillips. I don't know if they can help me get Christian, and we want to listen from you. What's your question?
Hello?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I have just a question. I was, listening very deeply, and I think is very interesting what we are saying, and we are listening today. I was just wondering, and this is a question for Robert Amsterdam and the others as well. I'm wondering why the international bodies and the international community is not, in front of all the evidence, that has been shared online, about, the rigging, about the violence. Why the international bodies are still quiet, like just the European Union, you said, in the last days, they made, some resolutions, but I remember, in Venezuela, for example, when Maduro won the elections, but many countries all over the world, they recognized the opposition leader like a legitimate president, and even in Myanmar, all over the world, many countries, are condemning. But about Uganda, they are still silent, So I'm wondering why, there is this fear. I don't know. I'm okay. Wondering why okay. This.
All right. Thank you, Christian, for that question. We got you. You'll have a response soon. I want to take all the questions, and then they will answer all together, and then we close this. Let me get the other question. I think Paul also wanted to have a question with us. Paul. Or let's get another person. I probably could have lost Paul Phillips. Can we have someone else?
I can. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. What's your name and where are you from?
So this is Paul Phillips. Are you hearing?
Yes, we can hear you. Just go ahead.
Okay, great. So sorry. So I had several questions. I wanted specifically to back up Michael and Bob. As an American citizen with deep interest in family ties in Uganda, I am seeing that it's very important for Ugandan diaspora to speak to their American and UK friends, ask their American and UK friends to participate in their democracy, to put pressure to sanction, call for ICC trials, and to get their representatives to actually pay attention to Uganda. And I'm wondering if, I've written several questions, but I'm wondering if any of the panelists specifically for the diaspora, can comment on Gene Sharp's work, Dictatorship to Democracy.
Thank you very much, Philip, for that question. Let's get one more person to ask a question or comment, and then we shall get down to panelists summarizing. And if we do not have any, I'll let Bob summarize with the question from Christian, who basically is wondering, why is it taking long? Why? It's been taking quite fast in other countries. Why is it taking long? Is there no proof to the international community about what is happening? Why is it taking long, Bob? This will definitely summarize on your side.
Well, quickly, I want to say that I'm a big fan of Gene Sharp's work. And then to go to, and I think if more people were following it, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in, not only in Uganda, but in many other countries. I think the timing is geopolitically ordained. The West simply sees Museveni as the key to stability in East Africa. We have an insurgency in Somalia. We've had a civil war in Sudan. And sadly, the West seems to believe this man somehow is the key to security. And if you remember the old expression of the American presidents who were constantly supporting dictators in South America, we know I think FDR said, we know he's a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch. And that's unfortunately the calculus that the US and Europe has made. And, we have no time. I won't keep going on, but that's the reason we're here. That's the reason he's gotten away with murder. And I hope that, as the other panelists have said, and they're all very active in trying to do this, I hope we can get to the diaspora and, with God's help, get this guy removed, because he is a stain on Uganda and on Africa. And, we all have to pray for the Ugandan people in these difficult times. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Richard, I'll turn to you. But before, I have Nantali on the line. Here, it seems like she has a burning question. Nantali, ask that question, and then Richard will respond to the other, and of course, probably yours inclusive. Are you on? Unfortunately, we don't have Natalia. So, Richard, over to you. In summary, what's your take on why is the government in the international world not taking quick response to what is going on in Uganda? What is next? Your sound, please.
As Bob has said, the primary reason of their inaction is the gravity of their own interest, their own geo-global interest. However, the second one, the first one again, in continuing, is because they see Museveni as the primary actor in pacification and stabilization of the East and Great Lakes regions of Africa. And we are saying that is actually not a correct assessment. And we would like to engage with them and say, this view of yours is counterproductive. And primarily because when you continue working with an autocratic leader to pacify that region, the result will be counterproductive. And how will that be? Because Museveni himself, while he pretends to pacify that region, he is a purveyor of inter-ethnic conflict, because that is how he manufactures his usefulness in that region. He manufactures the crisis and then pretends to solve them on behalf of the world. So we have to poke holes in that theory, in that belief, and then tell them they have to be careful, especially now that he has messed up his own country through the 2021 electoral fiasco. Because what is happening now is Ugandans, he is actually instrumentalizing ethnicity, the diversity of ethnicity in Uganda, so that ethnic groups can come against each other. And then he perpetuates again his own perceived usefulness by pretending to calm it down or to solve it. So the other second reason is the Western democracies' fear for the collapse of peace inside Uganda, because they think Ugandans will go against each other, in each other's throats, which also is a fallacy. And in the diaspora, for someone who asks what the diaspora is doing, we are engaging. We are engaging with the legislators, and we are also engaging with the executive, because we do think the executives sometimes make mistakes because they don't have enough information prior to making decisions. So we continue to engage with them, to let them know what the facts are, and also explain to them what ought to be done in consonancy of what they think is the right thing to do right now. Now, lastly, I want to tell all those who are listening to us, especially Ugandans, that in as much as the external constituents looks to be very important, please do not forget that the internal constituents, which comprises of Ugandans in Uganda, remains the primary factor in change. You guys in Uganda, if you dare, the world cares. When Kyagulanyi dared and withstood the tear gas and the bullets and everything, the world has cared. The world has risen up. If Ugandans continue to dare against the dictatorship, someone asks what should be done. We are not saying, as Michael said, go to the streets so that they shoot you dead. No. For God's sake, at least boycott. Those people in the regime are also the owners of most of economic production in the country. Boycott their goods. There are a lot of civil actions that Ugandans can take. When they dare, the world will care. When they keep quiet, nothing will be done. Even the little that is going on right now, that agenda will be obliterated.
Thank you very much, Richard, for that. Michael, you have a burning one? That's the very last one, just 1 minute. Touch your sound.
I like what Mr. Amsterdam said about the planets are aligning. Things are coming together just in the news cycle and with movements around the world. There are a lot of things happening that we want to take advantage as an opportunity. One of the things is that in order to share information, don't feel like when you talk about weapons, information is a weapon. Use information. There's been a lot of documentation that's done. Not only documentation of what's currently happening in Uganda. This is nothing new. The Western leaders, Western powers, Western citizens have to understand that what's going on in Uganda today is nothing new. It's all been documented. And I'll give my own plug here. You have 80 minutes of ammunition at your fingertips. If you share the information about a brilliant genocide, it is documented. The atrocities, the human rights abuses that happened in northern Uganda, and it alludes to the other criminal acts that have been done by the regime in Uganda. Use that 80 minutes of ammunition to communicate to your legislators, your civic groups, and to other people why changing the regime in Uganda has a sense of urgency. Use that information as your weapon to mobilize people. People are standing with you. I put my link in the chat thing. Feel free to connect with me. I'll pass on information to you. That's my plug.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much, everyone who has been watching us. I know we have been live on JB Muwonge, on Facebook, all social media outlets that have been carrying out this forum discussion. We thank you so much for all you've done to make sure that people can be able to be a part of this. I mean, I understand that information provides hope. Information gives more energy. And I'm sure that there is a lot of enthusiasm within Ugandans to have good democracy in their country. And whichever is a stumbling block, I can assure you at some point, everything that is strong will always have a weak point. And I can assure you at some point, it will get down to the feet. I want to thank Halima Athumani. I want to thank Robert Amsterdam. I want to thank Michael Kirkpatrick. I want to thank Michael Biakuleka, my friend in Massachusetts, for being part of this. We thank you so much, all of you who have been part of this. We wait to get to you on any other next panel as the organizers will be letting you know. Thank you. Keep it African Integration Forum. And from me, Moses Walgembe, I want to thank you so much. And I'm saying bye to all of you. See you later.